Hello, welcome. I'm Dr. Gotro, and this is Dr. Lisa Winstead's presentation. And her topic today is about global education issues and opportunities. And this is the second in a series for the College of Education at Cal State Fullerton webinars. And just to provide you with a little background information about Dr. Winstead, she's the coordinator for the Spanish Bilingual Authorization Program. She works in the Department of Education and of Elementary and Bilingual Education, and her expertise is in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in language literacy and culture. And she also has a master's degree in international relations, as well as a bachelor's degree in government and journalism. She speaks many, many languages, and I'm always impressed by all the traveling she does. She's run some study abroad programs in France, Japan, and Mexico. And as a matter of fact, she spent an entire year in France from 2014 to 2015. So the purpose of today's webinar is to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So by all means, ask as many questions as you would like to. We will have the chat window open for you, and you're welcome to type in, even if it's not questions, but if it's comments or maybe something you want to know a little bit more about. By all means, type it in, and this is intended to be a very interactive webinar. So interactive means that you're a great part of it. So please feel free to ask questions, and we'll make sure that we provide you with some robust answers. So here is Lisa Winstead for you. Thank you.
Hello. And thank you for joining. This is just a little bit about some of the research that I've done, and also I'm an editor of the Handbook of Research on Foreign Language Education in the Digital Age, which has to do with foreign language education, second language education, that sort of thing. And so that is my book, and I'm basing some of the information off of this introduction to the book. This webinar is divided into two parts. So we have uneven language status and history that contributes to educational issues globally. Some digital ideas follow as well. And then in part two, where I think we might have even more discussion, is we're talking about educational opportunities based on experiences in France, Mexico, and Japan. So, you know, I always like to go over concepts, and I think it's important to understand that language status contributes to some of the problems of education globally. For example, if you're a foreigner, if you're an immigrant, if you're a second generation individual, sometimes that can make a difference in how people perceive you or how people perceive others. And so foreign language, if we look at foreign language in Japanese, it's gaijin, which is actually outside person, means outside, right? Outside, actually this is outside country, okay? And then we have gaikokujin, which means outsider or outside country person, which I find, the Japanese language, the Chinese language, very good for helping us understand what does what does language mean? What does foreign language mean? So foreigners have often been considered barbarians or aliens, or even in the present day, we've used the term illegal aliens versus, undocumented or aliens. So this is used as a reference to some immigrants or even second and third generation individuals in many countries. Now, that's a problem when somebody's been in the country for a second and a third generation, right? Because shouldn't they be citizens? Or should they be more included in society? I'm not saying that immigrants should not be included, but I'm saying that if someone has been in society for quite some time, shouldn't they be included, maybe in the voting process? So I'm going to bring up some points later about how sometimes they're not included in the voting process. And I'm going to be talking about Japan. I'm going to be talking in France, yes, they are included, but I'm going to put forth some ideas about how some individuals are not included and how their language actually gives them a particular social status based on their history and their background. So I did want you to understand also something about identity. So you're either dominant or you're subordinate, depending on what country you're in. So there's this distinction of other or outsider to designate those who belong and those who don't. a way to create social and language hierarchies in society. So these hierarchies exist. So Bourdieu talks about the reproduction of social and class distinctions that can be further explained through cultural and linguistic norms and expectations. So let's say you do not speak the language fluently. Is it possible that others may judge you, and therefore may that affect your status in society? Maybe someone may not think that you are smart enough or something because maybe you have an accent. You see what I'm saying? So those types of things, accents, not speaking the language, what is considered to be the normal way of speaking, can actually influence how people perceive us and how people perceive our level in society, right? So let's look at ascribed identity. That can be associated with one's perception of personal identity. So self-conception, self-categorization. So how do we see ourselves? How do we categorize ourselves in this country, right? Let's say in the United States. How do we categorize ourselves in France? It depends on whether we're an immigrant, a descendant of an immigrant, or that sort of thing. It's based on a lot of things, right? So what is our interpersonal social group identity based on? We need to look at things like, what are our intergroup relations? Okay, so I just wanted to bring up that idea of ascribed identity, because identity has a lot to do with how, let's say, children feel in schools, whether they feel like insiders or outsiders. And a lot of you are doing research when you go into the classrooms about English learners. How are English learners made to feel in the classroom? Are they made to feel like they belong? So this is a question that we want to think about. Go back to that. Okay. So the idea of other status is tied to historical conflicts and postcolonialism. So, for example, in the United States, as you see here, obviously land was ceded, from Mexico to the United States. Now, was Mexico a colony of the United States? What do you think? Mexico was not a colony of the United States, right? Mexico was a colony of Spain, right? But it's interesting because although we talk about status being connected to post-colonialism, like let's say in France, so if we look at this other picture here, right? And we see Algeria. Algeria was a colony of France. So they are post-colonials. Do you see what I mean? So it was a prior colony, and they are now, if they live in France, they're post-colonials because there was a relationship between them and France. Or, for example, there was the French-Algerian War. Well, after the war and many years later in the 1960s, France needed a labor force. So they went to their colonies, whether it was in Algeria, whether it was in the Caribbean, and they invited individuals to be laborers. Now, in the United States, there was a war with Mexico with regard to the territory. So if you're looking at this map here, right, remember Texas originally belonged to Mexico, and then it was taken. So you see there, anytime that there's historical conflict, anytime there was a prior colony, that will make and create those levels of dominance and subordinance. So in US society, even though Mexicans were invited to come as laborers through the Bracero program, let's say, even in the 1920s and that sort of thing, sometimes they were looked down upon, right? Because they had the status, they had a blue collar status and that sort of thing. So these individuals are invited, and then sometimes later they come across the border, right? And they're not always documented. And that can create issues of status as well. So the thing is that because of this historical transnationalism that exists between countries, right? The dominant is going to be those who are in this country and speak the language, right? And those who don't speak the language are subordinate. You see how there's a dominant subordinate paradigm. The same thing with Algeria and France, or France's prior colonies, right? The French language is dominant, the culture is dominant, okay? So I just wanted you to kind of see how that can happen. And when we talk about Japan, it's the same thing. Japan colonized a number of different countries as well, one of which is Korea. And so there are Koreans who live in Japan, and they are obviously from the prior colony, and sometimes they don't have the same rights that the other individuals have. So these are some things that we need to look at in terms of how do children perform in these educational contexts. If we look at the United States, let me ask you this. How do Latinos perform? I mean, hey, Latinos are very smart, but when they're in a dominant, subordinate type of, let's say, position in a country such as the United States, what is their status?
Subordinate.
Subordinate. It could be, yes, because of the prior historical baggage that's associated with it. So these are the things that we want to take into consideration that I think I've even mentioned in some of my classes, that if a person were to go from Mexico to France, there is not that historical baggage that exists between France and Mexico. Well, okay, we could go to Maximilian in Mexico, but other than that, there's really not that history, right? And because of that, when a Mexican person goes to France, at least this is what folks have told me, they said, wow, I went over there and they said, oh, what's your background? I'm from Mexico. And they would say something like, really? You're from that land where they have the pyramids, right? So there's this whole nother dimension. They're seeing them in a different way because it's not the historical baggage between Algeria and France, right? There's none of that going on there, right? Because they had a history of war. So what we're looking at now is that status is tied to the prior historical conflict that was encountered between two different countries or nations, or their post-colonial status. So I just wanted to bring that up so you could see the idea of dominance and subordinates and how it plays out in test scores. So Latinos in the United States have a history of not performing well, right? So if we look at Latinos, why are they not performing well? They're smart, but what's going on? What is going on in terms of the psyche and the identity? Next thing, pushing linguistic and cultural homogeneity in the first world countries. Now I'm going to go to the questions. So what can we do? One of the questions is, how do we change the status? How do we overcome that historical baggage? How do we do that? How do we change that? Do we have to be aware ourselves?
Yeah.
So as teachers in the classroom, do we need to also maybe make it obvious to children that these types of conflicts existed and that we need to break the cycle of this dominance and subordinates? And does dominance and subordinates, does it exist just in the United States or does it exist globally?
No, globally.
Yeah, so it exists globally. So I really like some of the comments that are coming in and some of the questions. Dominance in American culture, right? That was a question. Why try to make them feel like the classroom is a safe, we try to make this is Katie Schooler to everyone. We try to make them feel like the classroom is a safe environment where their status or their ethnicity will not define what they can accomplish. Absolutely. So we understand what has been pushed in the psyche of individuals in the United States, right? And we have to be aware of that there's this idea of homogeneity, right? Assimilation that we talk about. So there can be national goals of homogeneity that can affect the positionality and success of minority groups, such as multiple generations of Koreans in Japan. Guess what? They also do not perform as well as their Japanese counterparts. They do well in the United States, but what happens when they're in Japan? Why are they not performing well? Is it associated with this idea of subordinates, right? That there's the dominant, right? And they're the subordinate based on that post-colonial status that they have. So I want us to keep that in mind, but I like the answers that are coming up. The dominance of American culture, yes. I mean, there is a dominance of American culture, and I mean, that's fine. I mean, we have a culture, it's fine, but what we need to do is that we need to acknowledge and we need to value what others bring to the country, because you can still be a loyal citizen to this country and still speak other languages. People come here from other cultures, have a lot of prior knowledge that they bring forth. So that's very important. So it's the idea that, you know, we can still be Americans and we can have American culture, but can we be more accepting and acculturate individuals rather than assimilate individuals, right? Chloe Justice also said, by properly training teachers with a multicultural curriculum and to instill that in their classrooms so every child grows up with equity. I appreciate those comments. Melanie Reich, to everyone, I hope I said the name correctly. I believe we have to be aware ourselves and introduce these conflicts to our students so they become aware. Absolutely. And being aware, let's see, I have another person here, Shelby Morrill. Hope I pronounced the name properly. Being aware of our biases are vital as well, all right? And teachers also need to show intercultural competence, said Katie Schooler. So I like the ideas that are coming up here. And I see that you're aware. And these are the dispositions that we want for our teachers that are going to be in the classroom. Diana Rodriguez, I think we need to be aware of any biases that we may have and try to close the gap of differences by allowing for opportunities to learn about different cultures. So, you know, part of that is what we're doing today is we're looking at other cultures, but we're looking at the status in other parts of the world, because this isn't just something that happens in the United States. Let me move on to the next slide. One of the things that really makes for language status and language hierarchies has to do with, let's say, US language policies, French language policies, Japanese language policies. I mean, policies in any country, could be China as well, right? But in the US, California passed Proposition 63 in 1986, making English the official language. So English is the official language. I think a lot of people knew that, but it passed, and this is when the number of minority majority students, Latino students, were rising in the state of California. So you wonder sometimes, are these reactions to individuals who speak another language, right? I mean, there's plenty of other people who speak other languages besides Spanish. So we have California's, you know, Proposition 227 and Arizona's Proposition 203 that restrict and devalue native languages and their use in states with high numbers of Latinos. So we see that these propositions passed. Now, Proposition 227 passed in 1998, and I used to teach back then. And I was told not to use Spanish with my newcomers from Mexico in the classroom. Do you think that that would have been difficult for me to do since they just came from Mexico and they were in a 7th grade classroom? It was hard. Entonces, si yo hablaría con ustedes, por ejemplo, en puro español, y daría, por ejemplo, esta presentación en español, ¿ustedes me pueden entender? If I were to give this entire presentation in Spanish, would you be able to understand? Would you, if that happened, would you like help to understand the content? Do you see what I'm saying? So we have to think about that these newcomers that come to our schools, they need that support to bridge from when they don't know any language to knowing language. They need that support, that language support. So the one of the things is the passage of these initiatives caused some problems. So some bilingual programs were shut down. Some dual immersion programs were also affected. There was a problem where you're going to become teachers, right? You're going to become teachers. Would you like to have bilingual aides in your classroom? Would you like that support in your classroom? When these kinds of propositions pass, there isn't an opportunity for you to have individuals in your classroom because it's been negated, right? So we don't see as many bilingual aides in the classroom. However, the good thing is, at least in California, Proposition 227 was repealed in 2016 by Proposition 58. So that just happened. So I hope, what do you think? Are you looking forward? That's not my phone. That's Cynthia's phone. Hi. Here you go. So anyway, So what we have is the passage of these initiatives, right? And then Proposition 227 was repealed. So I want to know if you're looking forward to possibly having bilingual aids in the classroom. There shouldn't be any reason now why you don't have bilingual aids helping you in the classroom. Do you think that you should be alone in the classroom doing all of this by yourself? I don't think so. And I don't think you think so. I think you would like to have that bilingual support. So when you have a newcomer child in the classroom, you can have somebody there who can at least translate some things for them. By the way, when these initiatives are being passed, these propositions, what messages are being sent to children and to families? What do you guys think? What messages are being sent to families? Now, it's interesting, I got a message from also someone who said status can't really change unless everyone becomes the same. Well, I don't want all of us to become the same because we're all different, but I like the idea that I think what this person means that treatment is the same, right? That there's equitable access to education. Educators can teach children the importance of education, this person says, and have less discrimination. Teach children and help them to be helpful to others. And she wants to know, how do we change the status? Again, I think that's by recognizing that these issues stem from history, that these issues stem from like historical, either post-colonialism or prior conflicts. Understanding that, making them aware, making ourselves aware, because sometimes we don't even understand why it is that we believe a certain way or why a certain language may have status over another language. In terms of, let's see, Paulina wrote, if teachers made the classroom feel like a safe place or a safe space, then students would feel more comfortable learning and not feel judged by it. So these are all very important points. Now, a safe space, I had somebody ask me, what is a safe space? A safe space would be your classroom. They come to your classroom and you're culturally responsive to them. Let's say you have children in your class. Let's say some of them are of different backgrounds, right? Because there's different ethnic backgrounds. We have individuals who are maybe from an Irish background, right? They're American, but they're from an Irish background. Maybe somebody else is from an Italian background. Maybe somebody is from a Mexican background, or we have somebody who's from an African-American, background. So what do? We make it safe for them to reveal who they are, maybe have some sort of activity that allows them to identify themselves, their family, different types of lessons like that. They're going to help them realize that, oh, look, this is me, this is my identity. They put their picture on the wall. Maybe they have some information about themselves. Maybe they have some information about their families. Then they know, wow, this is a safe place for me. I can talk about my language, I can talk about my background, and I can talk about my culture. So we create a safe place where we can have dialogue, because sometimes children, they don't understand about other children, right, what their background is. And we're going to provide them with opportunities for that, to have these open discussions with certain activities that are fun, that are enjoyable, where we get to learn about other people's heritage. So that's one way, but I like that question. And then somebody wrote something about, I like the salad idea versus the assimilation of the melting pot idea. Because last week, it's true, somebody wrote here that I had used the salad metaphor. And you're right, it's the idea that we're not all the same, that we're not all melting into one thing. The idea is that we're a salad, and wow, that tomato tastes really good, and wow, that lettuce and that piece of cucumber, it tastes really good, and it tastes really good all together, but we can still taste all of the individual pieces, right? We're not all the same, but we're combined, and we're combined for a better taste, right? That's what the salad is. It's all of us unified, but also being who we are, being who we are ourselves. So Christina Omid Salar, I hope I said it right, Omid Salar, said, we can be loyal to our nation, but we should also embrace immigrants and immigrant history, considering we are a country of immigrants. We should embrace and celebrate different cultural groups within our society, considering how diverse our country is. We should celebrate all cultures. I agree with you. Everybody has a background. A lot of us have lost it. I mean, I don't know anybody who's speaking Irish Gaelic anymore. They really call it just Irish. But anybody speak Irish Gaelic? I don't think so. I think that's been lost, right? So that has to do with different types of policies, and it's unfortunate that we should, lose a beautiful heritage like that. So let me move on to the next slide. So there's messages of identity that are being sent. So the message being sent to the child with these initiatives is that the child's language, heritage, way of communicating with family members is not valid. We want to make sure, the goal of Proposition 58 when it passed, the goal is to speak English, to write in English, to listen in English, to do all those things fluently, but it repealed the idea that it should be all in English. In other words, newcomers that come to classrooms should have an opportunity to have somebody help them bridge language, right? Help them understand in the beginning. So we want to validate whatever language and culture they come with. Does this language invalidation, like let's say we say Proposition 227 passed. When it did pass, did it promote in-group or out-group membership? So it did. It kind of made this like they were an out-group, right? Those individuals who maybe don't speak English well enough, they become part of the out-group. So how can invalidation of culture and language affect children's identity or success in school? Do you think that it might play a role in it? So sometimes when we're looking at different places, the rhetoric, the politics of a place can make a difference. So looking at France, former President Sarkozy said in an interview on CBN February 11th, 2011 that I happened to watch, "If you come to France, you accept to melt into a single community, which is the national community," he continued. "And if you do not want to accept that, you cannot be welcome in France." And we just talked about melting, didn't we? We talked about melting into the community, kind of losing our identity, losing our history, and losing our past. But in this case, this is what that president was sending out, that communicative message, right? That's how we should be. Well, I conducted a case study on immigrants in France. And actually, they're not all of them are immigrants. Actually, they're second and third generation. Even one of them is a citizen, but had lived in Madagascar and then went back. Now, here's some things that they know. They said identity is related to immigrant origin. In other words, when they're in France, they can't just say, "Oh, I'm French," because somebody will say, "Okay, you're French, but of what background?" And they'll say, "I'm French Algerian." So they're kind of forced to say, "Oh, I'm French Algerian, I'm French Malgache," which means I'm French, from Madagascar, or I'm French Tunisian, even if they've been there for 4 generations. So a lot of their identity is related to who they are, even though when you're in France, they don't collect statistics about your background and how you perform in schools. So there's no statistics like we have, where, how about Latinos? How do they perform? Okay. None of that exists in France because everybody's supposed to be the same. It's the idea in France that you are one and you are part of the whole and that we're all the same. But in reality, we're not all the same. Okay, so identity is related to immigrant origin. So the idea of integration in France is actually physical and social marginalization. So let's say you go to France and you are on let's say there's a city center, right? You're on the outside of France. If you're on the outside of France, you are kind of isolated. In the 1980s, when I lived in France, people that I went to school with that were of, let's say, Syrian origin could not rent in the city center. They could only rent outside, 2 hours away to get to the university. So that was a physical and social marginalization. Now, in these, what are called banlieues, you see there, that's the neighborhoods. They are integrated with immigrants. That's the evidence they provide. They are not integrated with mainstream students. They also say that they go to different schools and they have a different preparation, which in a way is a form of tracking. So Ellen says, in France, they have found a solution. You don't have the level for this, so you're going to go for a professional route. And a professional route is a vocational route. The teachers say you'll take a manual job and you'll learn that at 14 or 15 years of age. So you'll learn stuff like that. So let's say at the high school, you want to take courses in general studies. You want to become a doctor. That's what general studies is. A doctor, a lawyer, okay? So let's say at the high school, if you want to take courses in general studies, you learn about culture and things like that. They will say, no, listen, you do not speak well. Do you see how things are connected to your language and whether or not you speak well enough? They say, you do not speak well. You will not be able to go far. So you're going to do this. You're going to learn a career. It's better for you. So the professors counsel them into doing that. So in France, at least here, we don't have to make a decision at age 14, do we? In the United States. You don't have to make a decision at age 14. But in France, you have to determine what your career is going to be. Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a lawyer? Are you going to be a businessman? And take that general high track route. Or are you going to take the lower track, a vocational track, where you will become a server in a restaurant? Maybe you'll engage in some other blue collar work. So this doesn't give you the possibility in France at an early age to actually go into higher level of education. So I'm just going to stop there, but did you know this about France? Did you know that at all about France? And I really like, by the way, the responses about being aware of our biases, because I think that will really help. I see a lot about that. Properly training teachers with a multicultural curriculum to instill that their classrooms, that empathy and equity in the classrooms. I really like that too. So you have some good points there. But in the United States, the good thing is, at least, let's say we didn't make it, through high school. Could we possibly go to community college? And then could we possibly become a doctor? Is that still possible? It's still possible. I would say that would be the benefit of being in the United States, is that you could have messed up in high school, but there's still this opportunity for you to go to, let's say a junior college, and then maybe go to, higher, get a higher education. So that I see as a positive. I'm going to move on to Aida. Says also that she was tracked, but she thought at the age of 14, she chose the general route. So she's headed towards becoming a political scientist or becoming a lawyer or that sort of thing. But she says, I think it's horrible to say that to students that they don't have the capacity to go to general school. And in France, they don't have that possibility. Okay, so they don't have a possibility to do that, but in the US. So that didn't happen to me because I had good marks, she said. So most went to the professional route. So most of these folks who were socioeconomically disadvantaged, maybe underrepresented, go through vocational routes. And when they go there, they work as an intern for 2 years of their life. They don't get paid. And that's basically what they do. So she calls this disadvantaged, if you can see here, disadvantaged immigration. And when you're in these schools, which they're kind of called ghetto schools, they don't necessarily call them ghetto schools, but they're kind of like ghetto schools that with bad reputations, she says, you don't have the means to become successful on these general exams. You see, so by the age of 14 or 15, if you cannot pass the general exam, you cannot become a doctor or a lawyer in France. But anyway, so I just wanted to go over that a little bit. What about Japan? In Japan, there's the folks that are called the Zainichi, and they're Korean descent. They're pressured to assimilate, and many of their parents give them Japanese names so they can fit in society, but they too have low performance. And so this is an issue that happens globally, and it happens, not just in the United States, but it happens in Japan, and it happens in France. In any case. All right, so I wanted to move on to promoting well-being and inclusion. That's a lot of what you have been writing about. You said giving them a rather safe environment. So identity and belonging is tied to a sense of well-being. And we have to look out for these English-only discourses and make sure that we don't have them in our classroom and that we don't necessarily promote this idea of assimilation. As caring and committed educators and professionals, what can we do in schools? Yeah, so I want to open this up for discussion. So what is it that we can do in schools? Let me ask some folks here. So, Dantu, do you have any ideas? Like, what do you think that we should do in schools? What do you think, are there ways that we can act as teachers in schools to stem the disparities that exist and help them understand that these newcomer children are welcome? All children are welcome in our classroom.
Yeah, I think that, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I think I hear my own voice right now.
Echoing.
Echoing, yeah, okay. So I came here and I was an English learner throughout my middle school and high school years. And I think throughout my educational career in middle school and high school, I didn't have a lot of opportunities to learn English compared to other students that grew up here in the US and are Vietnamese descent. So I thought that was something that now as a student in the teaching program and a staff member at school, I do observe that teachers at my school, they're pretty much more inclusive than my teachers when I was a middle schooler back then. I noticed that in the classroom, teachers do post up posters about people in history that have made impact in history from various backgrounds. From the, like, I remember walking in one of the English teacher classroom and he has a poster about an Asian American successful individual. And then he also, next to it, he has a poster about an African American person who made an influence in history. And so I thought that was really interesting. And just to relate to this topic that we're talking about, promoting well-being and inclusion in school.
Absolutely.
That as caring and committed educators and professionals, we should be mindful about what we bring into the classroom for students.
Absolutely. Any child that comes into our classroom, whether that child is from Vietnam, whether that child is from the US, right, coming from another state to, let's say, Orange County or something where we're teaching, we want to make sure that all children feel welcome and that they feel comfortable. And we want them, and we know that they will perform better if they do feel welcome in schools, right? So we create that safe environment for them, and we create an environment where they feel that even, you know, they can talk about their language, maybe talk about their background and their culture, provide opportunities for them within the curriculum, within the standards, and that sort of thing. And I would agree with you that I think that over time we are seeing greater inclusion in schools. Yeah. I'm really glad to hear that you're also seeing that, you know, at the school site that you've been working at, because it's so important to helping individuals feel welcome, and also I believe it can truly affect their academic achievement, right? And so that's going to be the biggest thing that we can do is make them feel welcome in those ways. And it's good to know that there are teachers out there doing that. Yeah. And some of you have an assignment where you'll go into the classroom and you're going to be looking for those things. You're going to be looking for the types of, let's say, multicultural products that they have, or posters, or you're going to be looking to see, do these children have support in the classroom, right? Is the teacher differentiating in the classroom? So, you know, that's really important, and I really appreciate your comment. Did anybody else want to say anything? I can't see other people's names right at the moment. So did anybody else want to make a comment about that? It's a lot nicer when we're in class and we can do a think, pair, share, and then I can talk to you guys, you know. It's nice when you can when you can do that. One of the things that I wanted to also do was to talk about digital technology. A lot of you use digital technology, right? You're using it all the time. And isn't an equalizer, for example, in education? You know, the mobile phone is the tool of choice now. You know, people who can't afford computers, they can have access to a mobile device, right? Which is really great. And that gives them access to knowledge. So access can, you know, go to learners, for example, in remote places, you know, via wireless network, internet, and that sort of thing. But there is a divide between those who are privileged and those who are not. Even when we think about the use of the internet, even when we think about, how about our use? Do we pay more if we want a speedier internet through our cable company? Right? So some people have quicker access to information than others do. Is there some inequity in that some of us have to pay more? And do you believe that digital technology is equally accessible in schools? So I want you guys thinking about that. Oh, there's a lot of messages down below that I haven't seen yet, so let me look real fast. Okay, there's quite a few messages, so I'm trying to get down there. But what do you think about the digital idea? Because the good thing is we do have the phone, so now we can access. How about Brenda? Do you think that, Brenda Sanchez, do you think that there's equitable access to technology in schools?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sadly, well, I was thinking no, because at the school that I do my field work in, I felt really bad because I was working with kindergarten, and a lot of them didn't have access at home, so they tried to go to the computer lab at school, and even there they were having a lot of problems accessing codes and trying to get on the computers, and they kept shutting down, and the computers were really old. So it's just kind of, you would think at school they would have a greater opportunity to access technology, but unfortunately, like, depending on the like socioeconomic status of the area, a lot of the times it's not the case.
Does that put those individuals at a disadvantage when it comes to learning or maybe pursuing a career even in technology?
Yeah, I think so, because I know a lot of the kids would, like, maybe they haven't been given the opportunity to look into digital design, or maybe that's what they're gifted in and they don't know because they don't have resources to access these type of things.
So this is a big issue, because digital technology, the fact that we have access, the fact that we have phones, that's wonderful. That gives us access to knowledge. But we still need to be trained in schools, right? I mean, what are schools for if they're not going to help us become, you know, proficient, right, in technology, so that children could go, wow, I want to become that designer, or I want to become that web designer, or I want to become a computer programmer, or those sorts of things, right? So we need to make sure that children have access to technology. There's so much technology out there that they could use, but you're right, because of socioeconomics, right, that's going to make a difference in those who get access and those who don't get access. Okay, what time is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to move on to, like, there's new literacies, you know, that we've talked about the issues of access, digital divides. The digital divides are basically that, whether you have economic, you know, access to these types of, let's say, educational technology opportunities, right? Do you have access, or are you in a remote area where you don't have access, or are you in a school that doesn't have the computers that can access? So these are going to be, these are digital divides. These are what divides individuals and doesn't give them the opportunity to succeed in school. So, you know, the more access they have, the better, right? The more they're able to get online and to learn, that's going to be beneficial to them. So we need to provide them with those opportunities. Now I'm going to move on to, oh, well, we talked about that, right, already. What are some of the issues of possible access? It could be that the computers aren't not working. The computers are old. In other countries, it could be maybe there's access, but there isn't access in minority languages. Like you might go to China, for example, and maybe there's a minority language there and they can access it in Chinese, but they can't access it in their minority language. So those are some of the issues of access. Now I'm going to move forward because I just want to see if you have any questions on global education issues and opportunities. This was really the idea that I did want to go over some issues of educational opportunity and also some issues of uneven language status in France, Japan, and also the United States with regard to many of our students who come from Mexico. So does anybody have any questions about this? Let me see. I don't see the new question up here. Let me see. Okay. I'm trying to see if there's a question here. There's so many questions. I'm trying to get down to them. Hold on. I have a lot about culture and ethnicities and things like that. I think that teachers in today's society need to be aware of the different ethnicities, and that means all ethnicities, right? Oh, here's one. I was able to be in a bilingual classroom in Texas, and it was quite the experience. It was in San Antonio, Texas, where a lot of the students were Spanish-speaking students. In my internships, I noticed that Irvine, there's a lot of English learners, and many teachers are not prepared, though. So anyway, I really appreciate the comments. I think we've gone over some of this in class before, but I wanted to bring up the fact that these educational issues are global, that access to education and equitable education is really an issue all over the globe. It's not just happening in the United States. So anyway, I didn't see any other questions, so I'm going to move on to educational opportunities and study abroad. How many of you were interested in that? Could you raise your hand? Anybody interested in educational opportunities abroad? Anybody want to go to Japan? Anybody want to go to Korea? So there's some opportunities for you to go to other countries. Now, also, I just want to bring up that education is not equitable everywhere. For example, in the United States, we do have to pay for education, don't we? The good thing about France is that, you know what, in France, you don't pay for your education, right? If you can get into that general track, you get that upper track, you can go and take educational courses, history, you know, courses, become a political scientist, become a doctor, become a lawyer. Now, granted, you have to pass exams to do that, but education is free there, and education is also free in Canada. And you know about that, right? You're kind of aware of that. But in the United States, we do have to pay for our higher education. At CSU Fullerton,